my sister is an incredible chef, an incredible baker, although she wouldn't call herself either of those things. In fact, she was on a TV program a few years ago, and she was New Zealand's hottest home baker, and she was the people's champion, and probably the most popular contestant they ever had on that show. Anyway, I digress because I'm her brother. And in watching her, and then, they do all those interviews with them as they're going and talking about the various influences they've had and how they've come up with, their methodology and what influenced their cooking and all that sort of stuff. One of the things she talked about was cooking with our grandmother. And of course, there's been other people over the years and other influences. And it got me to thinking about, if we're talking about martial arts and the recipe and what goes into it, I think there's a number of elements, and it's not just the elements themselves, but how they're combined. And for me, a big part of that is different sensei, different instructors, different people that I've known over the years. So what I'm going to do in this little bit of a series is I'm going to talk over the next few podcasts about people that have added spice to my life, to my recipe. Some people you will know, some people you won't know. And I'm not talking about people in terms of how important they are, really, as they come to mind and as I reflect, they're the people that come forward. So I hope you enjoy this. Also, I'm going to put some companion videos up on YouTube so you can get a little bit of a look. There'll be links in the description so you can also have a look at these amazing practitioners. Kia ora, I'm Tuari Dawson and you're listening to the Invisible Sensei podcast. Lockdown was a killer for many things, and obviously the effect it had on our entire planet, not the least of which was people's health and livelihood and all those sorts of things, and I don't mean to diminish that. For me, I was very lucky in that I was gainfully employed and I managed to keep head above water, and also I was able to continue training. Now for me, what came out of that sort of terrible situation, I like isolation. I'm not really a people person. I can pretend to be, but what it was an opportunity, I guess, to really focus on my training, try and create some balance, given that it was a terrible situation in my life, and then try and find some way to keep myself inspired and motivated. So I'm going to talk about two sensei that when I think about inspiration and motivation, they've been massive tools towards those two ends. And as I said in the beginning, look, these are just people that are coming to mind, but I want to kind of just have a bit of a ramble. I hope you stay with me. So let's talk about what was going on in lockdown. I don't have to talk to you about lockdown and dwell on it too much, but one of the things that I did was, as we always do, I turned to social media. I'm pretty much a visual person, so I like that medium, and I was surfing Instagram one day. And, as things come up on your feed, you know how it works, algorithms, blah, blah, blah. This person came up in my feed, and it was this chap who was using a steel mace. And in the last couple of years, because of injuries that I've had, I've been looking for alternative ways of training. So I watched his videos and I'm going, oh, this is really interesting. I'd never used a steel mace before. So I watched his video. And then I realized he was actually a karate sensei. And his name is Sal Belahi Sensei. Now you can go back in the catalogue, and I think I call him the karate alchemist. And what I really like about Sal is I did get an opportunity to train with him in Canada. Lovely guy, beautiful karate, beautiful Kobudo, humble, quiet, almost to the point of like fading into the background if you possibly can. Certainly not a person who looks for any kind of acclaim, but he's got this fantastic Instagram channel, and it's called Steel Mace Karate. I'll put a link in the description. But what I like about Sal's approach is that when we talk about Hojo Ondo, especially as an Okinawan karate practitioner, we're talking about chiishi, nigirigami, all of those sort of, weight training, power devices, makiwara and all those sorts of things. Well, what Sal does is he finds ways to add an element of, some people are going to hate me saying this, but it's something which I really resonate with, an element of play in the way that he trains. So not only is he a high-level karateka and kubudoka, but he also climbs. He's involved in lots of other physical activities, but his karate over the last, since lockdown, has really developed. And I don't mean that in that patronising, condescending sort of way. Look how far he's come. It's just been really cool to watch him integrate more and more of this really wonderful way of training using body weight stuff, working on functionality. And also too, there's people who probably poo-poo the idea of it and go, well, that's not traditional. And I'm going, well, what is traditional? For me, what I see is a man who is in the grip of trying to discover something that works for him. He's not out there trying to convert anyone or bring anyone up. There's no message there. I think if there's a message, it's like find your way and find something which is healthy for your body. Now, if you listen back to the interview I had with Sal talks a lot about, he refers to, he had quite a serious back injury, and that was kind of an aha moment for him, in that he had to find new ways to approach the art that he really loved. And I watched some videos of his early in his YouTube channel, and his karate is excellent. I love it. He's predominantly a Shotokan karate practitioner, and there's Kobudo in there. And he has very strong Shotokan. Kata, very Shotokan, all the rest of that. Now, for whatever that may mean to you, I mean that in a completely positive way. And then you cut to, 2026, and you get on the YouTube channel and you see a real transition in terms of what I would call, as a Goju-ryu practitioner, a real embracing of the idea of Go and Ju, not as a style, but as an approach. And look, I've trained with him. I've met him. I've seen what he can do. He's powerful. He's flexible. He's fast. He's strong. But I think he is also an example of when you allow your curiosity and your common sense to combine in your training. I think he is a great example of that. And I'm inspired by that inquiry, by that spirit of, that shoshin, the beginner's mind. We talk about it a lot. But there's an element of him experimenting as you're watching with all these different training devices, from skipping ropes to kettlebells, maces of different sizes and shapes, body weight exercises. He finds ways to articulate his personal approach towards the martial arts, towards Kobudo and Karate in particular, in these really interesting ways. And I'm really inspired by that. And I think probably something that speaks to me, as I'm getting into my 50s, I'm going to be 54 in a couple of weeks. And so the way that I'm thinking about my training is a little bit different. And, people, like I said before, they go, oh, it's not traditional. And I think that at least for the Okinawan approach, and what I've seen of it, I'm not speaking for Okinawan people, but my impression is they used Hojo-Undo, they used Jishi and Negirigami and all those sorts of things because they didn't have access to expensive equipment. So they made do with what they had and created incredible physiques, an incredible level of martial skill. And what I like about Sal, and what I find inspiring, is he combines all those elements. You watch his Kobudo, you watch his Kama, you watch his Bo, his Sai, everything he does is just such a sense of integration in the way that he moves. And so when I put the link in the description, I really encourage you to go and check it out. On Instagram, Steel Mace Karate. And in terms of him as a person, I find him just to have absolute humility and an absolute openness to new experience in terms of training. He and his lovely wife travel and go on adventures and do stuff in nature, and they're an amazing couple. And I think the thing that I appreciate about him is a sensei, something I'm learning from, is that the humanity that he has as a person. He's not out there kind of letting off skyrockets and creating firecrackers. He's someone who wants to create the best version of how he tries to articulate karate. And I think it's something that I'm certainly trying to emulate, and I hope that you'll take some time to check it out. Maybe it's not for you, but I think check it out, and I am inspired by it. Maybe you're young, fast, strong, and all your joints work, but for me, I think that it's important to, if I want to continue to do these martial arts that I love, I have to find ways to do them in a healthful way that allows my body to not be carrying injuries all the time. The second sensei I want to talk about is Te Ruo Chinen. Te Ruo Chinen. And Chinen Sensei is well known to many Goju-ryu practitioners and karate practitioners, particularly in the States and around the world. He was prolific in his travel. Originally, obviously, trained in Okinawa, came out of the Jundokan, and then was a dojo brother to Moriu Higuana Sensei of the TOGKF. And, you know, I personally had conversations with Chinen Sensei in which, you know, he talked about, and he always acknowledged Higuana Sensei as a senpai. He always held a lot of respect for Higuana Sensei. Now, in New Zealand, Chinen Sensei and Higuana Sensei, back in the day when the world was a different place, would come out to New Zealand together. And Higuana Sensei and Chinen Sensei are two completely different builds. And they have two almost different and yet strangely complementary ways of approaching karate. And, you know, they were in Tokyo together, and they created the world famous Yoyogi Dojo, where all the legends kind of came out of. But I want to talk about, like I was talking about with Sal Sensei, what really inspired me about him. And I had opportunities to spend a little bit of time with him. I wouldn't call myself any kind of uchidechi close-in disciple or anything like that. I was just another person that probably he went to different countries, and I had opportunity to be in Spokane and train with him, but amongst the hundreds of others. But what I always really appreciated about him is that, you know, he always talked about the dojo kon, and in particular, part of the Okinawan Goju-ryu dojo kon is practice earnestly with creativity, and he kind of lived that. You watched him do hojondo. You watch him hit the makiwara. You watch him do kata. One of the things I was always really inspired with Chinen Sensei was that his kata was not the sort of staccato kind of beating of a drum. I mean, there was power, but there was also this wonderful kind of ebb and flow to the way that he did the kata. Beautifully fluid kata, but at the same time, extremely strong, powerful karate. So when I remember back in the early 90s, he came to New Zealand, and I was one of many at the dojo, and I remember getting up and having to demonstrate Geksai Daiichi, which is the first of 12 kata of the Goju-ryu syllabus. Anyway, I got up there and I thought, well, I'm going to go as fast as I can, as strong as I can. And I remember going to Yoi, and he just went wrong and just count ich. And I turned around to Jordan Agyuke and wrong, and then step forward the punch wrong. By the time I got to the Geramborai, the low block, I was an absolute nervous mess. And it was kind of from there that the learning really started. And my impressions of Chinen Sensei and the interactions I had with him was that he really lived a life of karate. He would turn up to New Zealand and he'd have a duffel bag and have a change of clothes, some toiletries and a gi in it. And so he lived this really kind of, I don't know, I guess for want of a better term, a Buddha existence, which was kind of inspiring to me. And of course, I'm thinking back to a time when, you know, I was 18, 19, so I was very impressionable. So he probably fulfilled a lot of those kind of expectations of the mysterious Okinawan Sensei. Anyway, I really like that Chinen Sensei seemed to be able to create these incredible drills. Now we have Sandan-gi, which is 3-level block training in Goju-ryu, and it's got, for me at least, it's a fundamental, it's a kihon. You know, Jodan, Chudan, Geran, head, middle, low. you're blocking, you're punching, one side blocks, it's a moving drill. He created, I think it was something like 20 of them, and they just ascended in terms of difficulty. And he took these really interesting turns. Like you start off with just basic reverse punches, and by the end of it, you're doing spinning red kicks on the ground, and you're doing throws, and that was, to me, was indicative of his approach. And his knowledge and mastery of Goju-ryu was very much, I felt, indicative of him, of where he was going and how he did Goju-ryu. Now, one thing that also inspired me about him was that when he came to New Zealand, I have always been involved in traditional Māori martial arts, the fighting traditions of our people, and he was very interested in that. And he took time to sit down and talk to a group of children that I brought, and he got up and he demonstrated this beautiful kata for them, and he really took time to connect with those kids. And I remember that was one of the things that really impressed me, that he was this incredible worldwide master, and yet he took time to sit down with these kids. And I remember going to Spokane and then getting into a situation where I was asked to do a demonstration of Māori martial arts. And I might put a little bit of that up on YouTube. I don't own the footage, but I might put a couple of snippets of that. And I just remember being really nervous to do it. But I remember how much Chinen Sensei would talk to me about it, and little bits and pieces that he would, he would ask these really interesting questions. But I think for me, Chinen Sensei and Sal Sensei represent to me, although completely different stylists and coming up in completely different eras of karate, just, represented to me the creative aspect of martial arts, the artistic aspect of martial arts. And for me, when we talk about arts, there is an element of creativity, a strong element of creativity. But there's also a strong element of fundamentals. With Sal Sensei, you're getting someone who is actively in pursuit of ways to strengthen, to connect to the core, to being flexible, to do things which strengthen the body without destroying it at the same time. And Chinen Sensei, I remember saying to me that, for the first 30 years of his karate practice, he carried a broken body. And so later on in his practice, he had to find ways to deal with those injuries, deal with the impact of a life of training had taken upon his body. And, Chinen Sensei passed away in 2015, and I felt really cool. Well, I think it was really cool to have had any time with him, to have had time personally in his company, to meet the community that he kind of created. And there's some incredible instructors that came out of that dojo, people I look up to today, looking at people like Armando Martinez Sensei of the OGKI in Miami, an incredible practitioner, an incredible man. People who, even though I don't train with a lot of those people anymore, and some of them don't train anymore, the example sticks with me still, and so I'm very thankful to Chinen Sensei for that. So what am I trying to get at in this? Well, I'm not really sure, to be totally honest. I think that when it comes to Sensei, these two men exemplify the idea of creativity and artistic expression. And people may differ. People may have a different idea about what it is, and I'm not comparing the two of them. I'm just saying, for me, in terms of where I've been and the journey that I've been on, I've been very lucky to have, for a short time, been influenced by both. So I encourage you to think back. I encourage you to think about who's influenced you and who do you want to emulate. Not impersonate, emulate. And I think for me, I know I spent many years trying to emulate, Chinen Sensei. I think we all did. Higuana Sensei, Chinen Sensei, they were the doyens of, the Goju-ryu that I was following at the time. And that is always to be expected. But I think for me, that emulating, looking at the principle and then incorporating that into your own practice, whether it be a way of using hojo undo, a kata, a technique, sparring, whatever it is. I think for me, that's the way that I want to go, and that's the way that I want to continue. So have a think on it. Have a listen to this. Have a check out of the YouTube video. You would see a couple of minutes of both of them just doing their thing. And I hope you enjoy it. So I'm going to do more of this, and I hope you enjoy the next few. So this has been my recollection of Sal Belahi Sensei and Turo Chinen Sensei, two incredible practitioners, two branches of the same tree.